Hi everyone, welcome back to Mirthful Diamond Paintings. I'm Netta, and this is part 4 of our Diamond Painting Plus audiobook journey with The Italian by Ann Radcliffe. I'm still working through this beautiful gothic canvas, and today, let's add a little sparkle, a little confetti, and maybe even a little calm. Whether you're diamond painting with me, crafting something else, or just listening while sipping tea, feel free to treat this video like a cozy podcast. Let's relax together and enjoy Chapter 4. While you're watching or listening, let me know in the comments. What's your favorite snack or drink while crafting? I'm always looking for new ideas that pair well with sticky hands and shiny drills. In Chapter 4, the intrigue deepens, with shadows, secrets, and just enough mystery to keep us hooked.
Chapter 3 of The Italian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Natalie Myers. The Italian by Ann Radcliffe. Chapter 3. Art thou anything? Art thou some god, some angel, or some devil, that makest my blood cold and my hair to stand? Speak to me what thou art. Julius Caesar. Vivaldi, from the period of his last visit to Altieri, was admitted a frequent visitor to Signora Bianchi, and Elena was, at length, prevailed upon to join the party, when the conversation was always on indifferent topics. Bianchi, understanding the disposition of her niece's affections, and the accomplished mind and manners of Vivaldi, judged that he was more likely to succeed by silent attentions than by a formal declaration of his sentiments. By such declaration, Elena, till her heart was more engaged in his cause, would perhaps have been alarmed into an absolute rejection of his addresses, and this was every day less likely to happen, so long as he had an opportunity of conversing with her. Signora Bianchi had acknowledged to Vivaldi that he had no rival to apprehend, that Elena had uniformly rejected every admirer who had hitherto discovered her within the shade of her retirement, and that her present reserve proceeded more from considerations of the sentiments of his family than from disapprobation of himself. He forbore, therefore, to press his suit, till he should have secured a stronger interest in her heart, and in this hope he was encouraged by Signora Bianchi, whose gentle remonstrances in his favour became every day more pleasing and more convincing. Several weeks passed away in this kind of intercourse, till Elena, yielding to the representations of Signora Bianchi, and to the pleadings of her own heart, received Vivaldi as an acknowledged admirer, and the sentiments of his family were no longer remembered, or, if remembered, it was with a hope that they might be overcome by considerations more powerful. The lovers, with Signora Bianchi and a Signor Giotto, a distant relation of the latter, frequently made excursions in the delightful environs of Naples, for Vivaldi was no longer anxious to conceal his attachment, but wished to contradict any report injurious to his love by the publicity of his conduct, while the consideration that Elena's name had suffered by his late imprudence contributed, with the unsuspecting innocence and sweetness of her manners towards him who had been the occasion of her injuries, to mingle a sacred pity with his love, which obliterated all family politics from his mind, and bound her irrecoverably to his heart. These excursions sometimes led them to Puzioli, Baia, or the woody cliffs of Pausilippo, and as, on their return, they glided along the moonlight bay, the melodies of Italian strains seemed to give enchantment to the scenery of its shore. At this cool hour the voices of the vine dressers were frequently heard in trio, as they reposed, after the labour of the day, on some pleasant promontory, under the shade of poplars, or the brisk music of the dance from fishermen on the margin of the waves below. The boatmen rested on their oars, while their company listened to voices modulated by sensibility to finer eloquence than is in the power of art alone to display, and at others, while they observed the airy natural grace which distinguishes the dance of the fishermen and peasants of Naples. Frequently, as they glided round a promontory, whose shaggy masses impended far over the sea, such magic scenes of beauty unfolded, adorned by these dancing groups on the bay beyond, as no pencil could do justice to. The deep clear waters reflected every image of the landscape, the cliffs branching into wild forms crowned with groves whose rough foliage often spread down their steeps in picturesque luxuriance, the ruined villa on some bold point peeping through the trees, peasants' cabins hanging on the precipices, and the dancing figures on the strand, all touched with the silvery tint and soft shadows of moonlight. On the other hand, the sea, trembling with a long line of radiance and shewing on the clear distance the sails of vessels stealing in every direction along its surface, presented a prospect as grand as the landscape was beautiful. One evening that Vivaldi sat with Elena and Signora Bianchi in the very pavilion where he had overheard that short but interesting soliloquy which assured him of her regard, he pleaded with more than his usual earnestness for a speedy marriage. Bianchi did not oppose his arguments. She had been unwell for some time, and, believing herself to be declining fast, was anxious to have their nuptials concluded. She surveyed with languid eyes the scene that spread before the pavilion. The strong effulgence which a setting sun threw over the sea, shewing innumerable gaily painted ships and fishing boats returning from Santa Lucia into the port of Naples, had no longer power to cheer her. Even the Roman tower that terminated the mole below, touched as it was with the slanting rays, and the various figures of fishermen who lay smoking beneath its walls in the long shadow, or stood in the sunshine on the beach watching the approaching boats of their comrades, combined a picture which was no longer interesting. "Alas!" said she, breaking from meditative silence, "this sun so glorious, which lights up all the various coloring of these shores, and the glow of those majestic mountains, alas! I feel that it will not long shine for me. My eyes must soon close upon the prospect forever." To Elena's tender reproach for this melancholy suggestion Bianchi replied only by expressing an earnest wish to witness the certainty of her being protected, adding that this must be soon, or she should not live to see it. Elena, extremely shocked both by this presage of her aunt's fate and by the direct reference made to her own condition in the presence of Vivaldi, burst into tears, while he, supported by the wishes of Signora Bianchi, urged his suit with increased interest. "This is not a time for fastidious scruples," said Bianchi. "Now that a solemn truth calls out to us, my dear girl, I will not disguise my feelings. They assure me I have not long to live. Grant me then the only request I have to make, and my last hours will be comforted." After a pause, she added, as she took the hand of her niece, This will, no doubt, be an awful separation to us both, and it must also be a mournful one, Signor," turning to Vivaldi, "for she has been a daughter to me, and I have, I trust, fulfilled to her the duties of a mother. Judge then what will be her feelings when I am no more, but it will be your care to soothe them." Vivaldi looked at Elena, and would have spoken. Her aunt, however, proceeded: "My own feelings would now be little less poignant if I did not believe that I was confiding her to a tenderness which cannot diminish. That I should prevail with her to accept the protection of a husband. To you, Signor, I commit the legacy of my child. Watch over her future moments, guard her from inquietude as vigilantly as I have done, and, if possible, from misfortune. I have yet much to say, but my spirits are exhausted." While he listened to this sacred charge, and recollected the injury Elena had already sustained for his sake by the cruel obloquy which the Marchese had thrown upon her character, he suffered a degree of generous indignation, of which he scarcely could conceal the cause, and a succeeding tenderness that almost melted him to tears. And he secretly vowed to defend her fame and protect her peace at the sacrifice of every other consideration. Bianchi, as she concluded her exhortation, gave Elena's hand to Vivaldi, who received it with emotions such as his countenance only could express, and with solemn fervour raising his eyes to heaven, vowed that he never would betray the confidence thus reposed in him, but would watch over the happiness of Elena with a care as tender, as anxious, and as unceasing as her own; that from this moment he considered himself bound by ties not less sacred than those which the Church confers to defend her as his wife, and would do so to the latest moment of his existence. As he said this, the truth of his feelings appeared in the energy of his manner. Elena, still weeping and agitated by various considerations, spoke not, but withdrawing the handkerchief from her face, she looked at him through her tears with a smile so meek, so affectionate, so timid, yet so confiding, as expressed all the mingled emotions of her heart, and appealed more eloquently to his than the most energetic language could have done. Before Vivaldi left the villa, he had some further conversation with Signora Bianchi, when it was agreed that the nuptials should be solemnized on the following week, if Elena could be prevailed on to confirm her consent so soon, and that when he returned the next day, her determination would probably be made known to him. He departed for Naples once more with the lightly bounding steps of joy, which, however, when he arrived there, was somewhat alloyed by a message from the Marchese demanding to see him in his cabinet. Vivaldi anticipated the subject of the interview, and obeyed the summons with reluctance. He found his father so absorbed in thought that he did not immediately perceive him. On raising his eyes from the floor, where discontent and perplexity seemed to have held them, he fixed a stern regard on Vivaldi.
"I understand,"
said he,
"that you persist in the unworthy pursuit against which I warned you. I have left you thus long to your own discretion because I was willing to afford you an opportunity of retracting with grace the declaration which you have dared to make me of your principles and intentions, but your conduct has not therefore been the less observed. I am informed that your visits have been as frequent at the residence of the unhappy young woman who was the subject of our former conversation, as formerly, and that you are as much infatuated."
"If it is Signora Rosalba whom your lordship means," said Vivaldi, "she is not unhappy, and I do not scruple to own that I am as sincerely attached to her as ever. Why, my dear father," continued he, subduing the feelings which this degrading mention of Elena had aroused, "why will you persist in opposing the happiness of your son, and, above all, why will you continue to think unjustly of her, who deserves your admiration as much as my love?"
"As I am not a lover,"
replied the Marchese,
"and that the age of boyish credulity is past with me, I do not wilfully close my mind against examination, but am directed by proof, and yield to the conviction."
"What proof is it, my lord, that has thus easily convinced you?" said Vivaldi. "Who is it that persists in abusing your confidence and in destroying my peace?" The Marchese haughtily reproved his son for such doubts and questions, and long conversation ensued, which seemed neither to reconcile the interests or the opinions of either party. The Marchese persisted in accusation and menace, and Vivaldi in defending Elena, and in affirming that his affections and intentions were irrecoverable. Not any art of persuasion could prevail with the Marchese to adduce his proofs or deliver up the name of his informer, nor any menace awe Vivaldi into a renunciation of Elena, and they parted mutually dissatisfied. The Marchese had failed on this occasion to act with his usual policy, for his menaces and accusations had aroused spirit and indignation, when kindness and gentle remonstrance would certainly have awakened filial affection, and might have occasioned a contest in the breast of Vivaldi. Now no struggle of opposing duties divided his resolution. He had no hesitation on the subject of their dispute, but regarding his father as a haughty oppressor who would rob him of his most sacred right, and as one who did not scruple to stain the name of the innocent and the defenceless, when his interest required it, upon the doubtful authority of a base informer, he suffered neither pity or remorse to mingle with the resolution of asserting the freedom of his nature, and was even more anxious than before to conclude a marriage which he believed would secure his own happiness and the reputation of Elena. He returned, therefore, on the following day to the Villa Altieri, with increased impatience to learn the result of Signora Bianchi's further conversation with her niece, and the day on which the nuptials might be solemnized. On the way thither his thoughts were wholly occupied by Elena, and he proceeded mechanically, and without observing where he was, till the shade which the well-known arch threw over the road recalled him to local circumstances, and a voice instantly arrested his attention. It was the voice of the monk, whose figure again passed before him.
"Go not to the Via Altieri,"
he said solemnly,
"for death is in the house."
Before Vivaldi could recover from the dismay into which this abrupt assertion and sudden appearance had thrown him, the stranger was gone. He had escaped in the gloom of the place, and seemed to have retired into the obscurity from which he had so suddenly emerged, for he was not seen to depart from under the archway. Vivaldi pursued him with his voice, conjuring him to appear, and demanding who was dead, but no voice replied. Believing that the stranger could not have escaped unseen from the arch by any way but that leading to the fortress above, Vivaldi began to ascend the steps, when, considering that the more certain means of understanding this awful assertion would be to go immediately to the Via Altieri, he left this portentous ruin and hastened thither. An indifferent person would probably have understood the words of the monk to allude to Signora Bianchi, whose infirm state of health rendered her death, though sudden, not improbable; but to the affrighted fancy of Vivaldi the dying Elena only appeared. His fears, however probabilities might sanction, or the event justify them, were natural to ardent affection, but they were accompanied by a presentiment as extraordinary as it was horrible. It occurred to him more than once that Elena was murdered. He saw her wounded and bleeding to death, saw her ashy countenance and her wasting eyes, from which the spirit of life was fast departing, turned piteously on himself as if imploring him to save her from the fate that was dragging her to the grave, and when he reached the boundary of the garden his whole frame trembled so with horrible apprehension that he rested awhile, unable to venture further towards the truth. At length he summoned courage to dare it, and, unlocking a private gate of which he had lately received the key, because it spared him a considerable distance of the road to Naples, he approached the house. Every place around it was silent and forsaken. Many of the lattices were closed, and as he endeavored to collect from every trivial circumstance some conjecture, his spirits still sunk as he advanced, till, having arrived within a few paces of the portico, all his fears were confirmed. He heard from within a feeble sound of lamentation, and then some notes of that solemn and peculiar kind of recitative which is in some parts of Italy the requiem of the dying. The sounds were so low and distant they only murmured on his ear, but without pausing for information he rushed into the portico and knocked loudly at the folding doors now closed against him. After repeated summonses, Beatrice, the old housekeeper, appeared. She did not wait for Vivaldi's inquiries. "Alas, signor!" said she. "Alas a day! Who would have thought it? Who would have expected such a change as this? It was only yesterday evening that she was here. She was then as well as I am. Who would have thought that she would be dead to-day?"
"She is dead, then?"
exclaimed Vivaldi, struck to the heart.
"She is dead!"
Staggering toward a pillar in the hall, and endeavoring to support himself against it, Beatrice, shocked at his condition, would have gone for assistance, but he waved her to stay.
"When did she die?"
said he, drawing breath with difficulty.
"How, and where?"
"Alas, here in the villa, signor," replied Beatrice, weeping. "Who would have thought that I should live to see this day? I hoped to have laid down my old bones in peace."
"What has caused her death?"
interrupted Vivaldi impatiently.
"And when did she die?"
"About 2 of the clock this morning, signor. About 2 o'clock. Oh, miserable day that I should live to see it!"
"I am better,"
said Vivaldi, raising himself.
"Lead me to her apartment. I must see her. Do not hesitate. Lead me on."
"Alas, signor, it is a dismal sight. Why should you wish to see her? Be persuaded, do not go, signor. It is a woeful sight."
"Lead me on,"
repeated Vivaldi sternly.
"or if you refuse I will find the way myself."
Beatrice, terrified by his look and gesture, no longer opposed him, begging only that he would wait till she had informed her lady of his arrival, but he followed her closely up the staircase and along a corridor that led round the west side of the house, which brought him to a suite of chambers, darkened by the closed lattices, through which he passed towards the one where the body lay. The requiem had ceased, and no sound disturbed the awful stillness that prevailed in these deserted rooms. At the door of the last apartment, where he was compelled to stop, his agitation was such that Beatrice, expecting every instant to see him sink to the floor, made an effort to support him with her feeble aid, but he gave a signal for her to retire. He soon recovered himself and passed into the chamber of death, the solemnity of which might have affected him in any other state of his spirits, but these were now too severely pressed upon by real suffering to feel the influence of local circumstances. Approaching the bed on which the corpse was laid, he raised his eyes to the mourner who hung weeping over it, and beheld Elena, who, surprised by this sudden intrusion, and still more by the agitation of Vivaldi, repeatedly demanded the occasion of it. But he had neither power or inclination to explain a circumstance which must deeply wound the heart of Elena, since it would have told that the same event which excited her grief accidentally inspired his joy. He did not long intrude upon the sacredness of sorrow, and the short time he remained was employed in endeavors to command his own emotion and to soothe hers. When he left Elena, he had some conversation with Beatrice as to the death of Signora Bianchi, and understood that she had retired to rest on the preceding night apparently in her usual state of health. "It was about 1 in the morning, signor," continued Beatrice. "I was waked out of my first sleep by a noise in my lady's chamber. It is a grievous thing to me, signor, to be waked from my first sleep, and I, Santa Maria forgive me, was angry at being disturbed, so I would not get up, but laid my head upon the pillow again, and tried to sleep. But presently I heard the noise again. Nay, now, says I, somebody must be up in the house, that's certain. I had scarcely said so, signor, when I heard my young lady's voice calling Beatrice, Beatrice. Ah, poor young lady! She was indeed in a sad fright, as well she might. She was at my door in an instant, and looked as pale as death, and trembled so. 'Beatrice,' said she, 'rise this moment, my aunt is dying.' She did not stay for my answer, but was gone directly. Santa Maria protect me! I thought I should have swooned outright."
"Well, but your lady?"
said Vivaldi, whose patience the tedious circumlocution of old Beatrice had exhausted. "Ah, my poor lady! Signor, I thought I never should have been able to reach her room, and when I got there I was scarcely more alive than herself. There she lay on her bed. Oh, it was a grievous sight to see. There she lay, looking so piteously. I saw she was dying. She could not speak, though she tried often, but she was sensible, for she would look so at Signora Elena, and then try again to speak. It almost broke one's heart to see her. Something seemed to lie upon her mind, and she tried almost to the last to tell it, and as she grasped Signora Elena's hand, she would still look up in her face with such doleful expression as no one who had not a heart of stone could bear. My poor young mistress was quite overcome by it, and cried as if her heart would break. Poor young lady, she has lost a friend indeed, such a one as she must never hope to see again.
But she shall find one as firm and affectionate as the last,"
exclaimed Vivaldi fervently. The good saint grant it may prove so, replied Beatrice doubtingly. All that could be done for our dear lady, she continued, was tried, but with no avail. She could not swallow what the doctor offered her. She grew fainter and fainter, yet would often utter such deep sighs, and then would grasp my hand so hard. At last she turned her eyes from Signora Elena, and they grew duller and fixed, and she seemed not to see what was before her. Alas, I knew then she was going. Her hand did not press mine as it had done a minute or two before, and a deadly coldness was upon it. Her face changed so too in a few minutes. This was about 2 o'clock, and she died before her confessor could administer. Beatrice ceased to speak, and wept. Vivaldi almost wept with her, and it was some time before he could command his voice sufficiently to inquire what were the symptoms of Signora Bianchi's disorder, and whether she had ever been thus suddenly attacked before. "Never, signor," replied the old housekeeper, "and though to be sure she has long been very infirm, and going down as one may say, yet—"
"What is it you mean?"
said Vivaldi. "Why, signor, I do not know what to think about my lady's death. To be sure, there is nothing certain, and I may only get scoffed at if I speak my mind abroad, for nobody would believe me. It is so strange, yet I must have my own thoughts for all that."
"Do speak intelligibly," said Vivaldi. "You need not apprehend censure from me."
"Not from you, signor, but if the report should get abroad, and it was known that I had set it a-going—"
"That never shall be known from me," said Vivaldi with increased impatience. "Tell me, without fear, all that you conjecture."
"Well, then, signor, I will own that I do not like the suddenness of my lady's death. No, nor the manner of it, nor her appearance after death."
"Speak explicitly and to the point,"
said Vivaldi. "Nay, signor, there are some folks that will not understand if you speak ever so plain. I am sure I speak plain enough. If I might tell my mind, I do not believe she came fairly by her death at last."
"How?" said Vivaldi. "Your reasons?"
"Nay, signor, I have given them already. I said I did not like the suddenness of her death, nor her appearance after, nor—"
"Good heaven!" interrupted Vivaldi. "You mean poison."
"Hush, signor, hush! I do not say that, but she did not seem to die naturally,"
"Who has been at the villa lately?"
said Vivaldi in a tremulous voice. "Alas, signor, nobody has been here. She lived so privately that she saw nobody."
"Not one person?" said Vivaldi. "Consider well, Beatrice. Had she no visitor?"
"Not of a long while, signor. No visitors but yourself and her cousin, Signor Giotto. The only other person that has been within these walls for many weeks, to the best of my remembrance, is a sister of the convent, who comes for the silks of my young lady's embroiders."
"Embroiders? What convent?"
"The Santa Maria della Pieta, yonder, signor. If you will step this way to the window, I will show it to you. Yonder, among the woods on the hillside, just above those gardens that stretch down to the bay, there is an olive ground close beside it. And observe, signor, there is a red and yellowish ridge of rocks rises over the woods higher still, and looks as if it would fall down upon those old spires. Have you found it, signor?"
"How long is it since the sister came here?"
said Vivaldi. "3 weeks at least, signor."
"And you are certain that no other person is called within that time?"
"No other, signor, except the fisherman and the gardener, and a man who brings macaroni, and such sort of things, for it is such a long way to Naples, signor, and I have so little time."
3 weeks, say you? You said 3 weeks, I think. Are you certain as to this?"
3 weeks, Senor! Santa de la Pieta! Do you believe, Senor, that we could fast for 3 weeks? Why, they call almost every day."
"I speak of the nun,"
said Vivaldi. "Oh, yes, Senor," replied Beatrice. "It is that, at least, since she was here."
"This is strange," said Vivaldi, musing, "but I will talk with you some other time. Meanwhile, I wish you could contrive that I should see the face of your deceased lady without the knowledge of Signora Elena. And observe me, Beatrice, be strictly silent as to your surmises concerning her death. Do not suffer any negligence to betray your suspicions to your young mistress. Has she any suspicions herself of the same nature?"
Beatrice replied that she believed Signora Elena had none, and promised faithfully to observe his injunctions. He then left the villa, meditating on the circumstances he had just learned, and on the prophetic assertion of the monk, between whom and the cause of Bianchi's sudden death he could not forbear surmising there was some connection. And it now occurred to him, and for the first time, that this monk, this mysterious stranger, was no other than Schedoni, whom he had observed of late going more frequently than usual to his mother's apartment. He almost started in horror of the suspicion to which this conjecture led, and precipitately rejected it as a poison that would destroy his own peace forever. But though he instantly dismissed the suspicion, the conjecture returned to his mind, and he endeavored to recollect the voice and figure of the stranger, that he might compare them with those of the confessor. The voices were, he thought, of a different tone, and the persons of a different height and proportion. This comparison, however, did not forbid him to surmise that the stranger was an agent of the confessor's, that he was at least a secret spy upon his actions, and the defamer of Elena, while both, if indeed there were two persons concerned, appeared to be at the command of his parents. Fired with indignation of the unworthy arts that he believed to have been employed against him, and impatient to meet the slander of Elena, he determined to attempt some decisive step towards a discovery of the truth, and either to compel the confessor to reveal it to him, or to search out his agent, who he fancied was occasionally a resident within the ruins of Paluzzi. The inhabitants of the convent which Beatrice had pointed out did not escape his consideration, but no reason appeared for supposing them the enemies of his Elena, who, on the contrary, he understood, had been for some years amicably connected with them. The embroidered silks of which the old servant had spoken sufficiently explained the nature of the connection, and discovering more fully the circumstances of Elena's fortune, her conduct heightened the tender admiration with which he had hitherto regarded her. The hints for suspicion which Beatrice had given respecting the cause of her mistress's decease incessantly recurred to him, and it appeared extraordinary, and sometimes in the highest degree improbable, that any person could sufficiently interested in the death of a woman apparently so blameless as to administer poison to her. What motive could have prompted so horrible a deed was still more inexplicable. It was true that she had long been in a declining state, yet the suddenness of her departure, and the singularity of some circumstances preceding as well as some appearances that had followed it, compelled Vivaldi to doubt as to the cause. He believed, however, that after having seen the corpse his doubts must vanish, and Beatrice had promised that if he could return in the evening, when Elena had retired to rest, he should be permitted to visit the chamber of the deceased. There was something repugnant to his feelings in going thus secretly, or indeed at all, to the residence of Elena at this delicate period, yet it was necessary he should introduce there some medical professor on whose judgment he could rest respecting the occasion of Bianchi's death, and as he believed he should so soon acquire the right of vindicating the honour of Elena, that consideration did not so seriously affect him as otherwise it would have done. The inquiry which called him thither was besides of a nature too solemn and important to be lightly resigned. He had, therefore, told Beatrice he would be punctual to the hour she appointed. His intention to search for the monk was thus again interrupted. End of chapter 3. Recording by Natalie Myers.
Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope your canvas is coming along beautifully, or that your to-do list got a little shorter while listening. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you'd like more audiobook plus diamond painting sessions. Until next time, stay sparkly.